Treaty of Portsmouth, 1905. President Theodore Roosevelt played a crucial role in mediating the peace treaty that ended the Russo-Japanese War, which had been fought over territorial disputes in East Asia. Roosevelt invited representatives from Russia and Japan to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to negotiate a peace settlement. After weeks of intense discussions, the Treaty of Portsmouth was signed in September 1905. This treaty helped Japan secure control over Korea and parts of Manchuria, while Russia retained influence in other areas. Roosevelt's successful diplomacy earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1906, making him the first U.S. president to receive the honor. Industrial Workers of the World, EE.UU, founded 1905. The EE.UU, also known as the Wobblies, was founded in Chicago in 1905 as a radical labor union aimed at uniting workers across all industries. Unlike traditional unions that organized workers by specific trades, the EE.UU sought to organize all workers, skilled or unskilled, regardless of race or gender, into one massive union. The EE.UU opposed capitalism and advocated for direct action, including strikes and boycotts, to achieve workers' rights and better conditions. The union's militant tactics and socialist-leaning ideology made it highly controversial, but it played a significant role in the labor movement in the early 20th century. Theodore Roosevelt's second inauguration, 1905. On March 4, 1905, Theodore Roosevelt was inaugurated for his second term as president after winning a landslide victory in the 1904 election. His inaugural address emphasized progressive ideals, such as fair regulation of big businesses, labor rights, and conservation of natural resources. Roosevelt vowed to continue his aggressive trust-busting campaign to break up monopolies and promote competition. He also reaffirmed the United States' growing role on the world stage, with a foreign policy focused on diplomacy backed by military strength, which came to be known as Roosevelt's Big Stick diplomacy. Niagara Movement founded, 1905. W.E.B. Du Bois and other prominent African-American leaders founded the Niagara Movement, an early civil rights organization that aimed to challenge racial discrimination and promote equality for African Americans. The movement was a response to the more conservative approaches of Booker T. Washington, who advocated for gradual progress through vocational training. In contrast, the Niagara Movement demanded immediate civil rights, the right to vote, and equal treatment under the law. Though small in numbers, the movement was a precursor to the formation of the NAACP in 1909 and laid the foundation for future civil rights efforts in the United States. Lochner v. New York Supreme Court case. Decided in 1905, Lochner v. New York became a landmark case in U.S. labor law. The case centered on a New York state law that limited bakers to working no more than 10 hours a day and 60 hours a week. Joseph Lochner, a bakery owner, argued that the law violated his right to make contracts with his employees. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Lochner, stating that the law interfered with the freedom of contract, which was protected by the 14th Amendment. This ruling set a precedent against labor regulation and hindered progressive efforts to improve working conditions until it was overturned decades later. Chicago Teamsters strike. In April 1905, the Chicago Teamsters strike erupted when Teamsters, workers who drove horse-drawn wagons, went on strike to support department store workers fighting for better wages and working conditions. The strike quickly escalated, involving more than 25,000 workers, and turned violent with clashes between strikers, police, and hired strikebreakers. The strike lasted for several months and resulted in deaths, injuries, and significant economic disruption. While the strike ultimately failed to achieve its immediate goals, it highlighted the growing tensions between labor unions and employers in early 20th century America. Roosevelt's antitrust actions. In 1905, President Theodore Roosevelt intensified his campaign against monopolies and trusts. Known as the Trust Buster, Roosevelt used the Sherman Antitrust Act to take legal action against large corporations that he believed were engaging in unfair business practices and stifling competition. In 1905, his administration targeted several major companies, including the Northern Securities Company, a large railroad trust. Roosevelt's actions sent a clear message that the federal government would no longer tolerate monopolistic practices. His commitment to regulating big businesses helped lay the foundation for modern antitrust laws and was a key aspect of his progressive agenda. Forest conservation efforts, 1905. Roosevelt took significant steps to expand federal protection of the nation's forests. He transferred the management of national forests from the Department of the Interior to the newly created United States Forest Service, which was part of the Department of Agriculture. Gifford Pinchot, a leading conservationist and close ally of Roosevelt, was appointed the first chief of the Forest Service. This move reflected Roosevelt's belief in the sustainable management of natural resources and the importance of conservation. Under his leadership, millions of acres of public lands were preserved, and the foundation for modern environmental policies was established. The Great San Francisco Earthquake Preparations, 1905. Although the massive San Francisco earthquake would not occur until April 1906, concerns about the city's infrastructure and readiness for natural disasters were prominent in 1905. City planners, engineers, and government officials discussed the need for better construction standards and emergency preparedness, particularly because San Francisco was growing rapidly and was a key hub for trade and commerce on the West Coast. These discussions became crucial in the wake of the devastating earthquake and fires that would strike the city the following year, highlighting the importance of urban planning and disaster preparedness. Chicago Cubs' early baseball dominance, 1905. The Chicago Cubs continued to establish themselves as one of the dominant teams in Major League Baseball. Although they did not win the World Series that year, their strong performance was part of a building momentum that would lead to their back-to-back World Series championships in 1907 and 1908. The Cubs roster included standout players like Mordecai, Three-Finger Brown, and Frank Chance, and their success helped popularize baseball as America's pastime. The Cubs' rise to dominance in the early 20th century remains a celebrated chapter in the history of the sport.